Good afternoon. This is Mike Brakey. This is part 5 of 5 of Black Swan Climate Theory, the cover up. In earlier parts, in part 1, we did a brief bio and some closing observations. In part 2, I tried to explain how heating degree days work and how it's converted into regular Fahrenheit temperatures. And what were the driving forces for the heating system we were looking to put in to a building on a lake? In part 3, we talked about the conflicts of different agencies, and some indicating global warming, some indicating global cooling. All my focus has been is just using Maine local temperatures as a barometer of what may or may not be happening. In part 4, we discuss Feynman's definition of theory and what makes a theory valid or invalid. We looked at local temperatures and the impact on ocean currents and the decadum oscillatums associated with the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. But near the end, we indicated there's still a lack of consensus by many parties throughout the United States on what direction we're going in, warming or cooling, and therefore we just call it climate change. Now we're at part 5, where I'm going to get into some of the specifics that were discussed at the very beginning in the way of the closing observations. And with that, we'll continue. As I mentioned before, based on NOAA February 2013 published data on their websites, which I downloaded quite a bit of that for archiving purposes, um, my statistical analysis indicated that for at least for Lewiston Auburn area of Maine, based on what may be happening to ocean currents, I see the potential of a 3-degree drop in temperature over the next 35 years, going from 1935, 2000 to 2040. And so at the same time, people who are looking at the NOAA 2015 data drew a conclusion from that, as was discussed in an earlier section, that we've had 14 of the 15 warmest years in the last century recently, and that all data indicates that we have global warming continuing for Maine. And in fact, we have a Maine Professor of the Year indicating that based on his review of the statistical data, and I don't know where he's drawing the statistical data from. It may be very well from the NOAA 2015 information. This professor indicates that he sees a 3-degree warming occurring between over the next 35 years, as we've highlighted here. And therefore, this is a full 6-degree swing from what I perceive happening to what he's stating that's happening, which has a dramatic impact on people who are preparing new homes or insulating their homes for the future. If we're heading toward global warming, they don't have to be too concerned about higher energy costs due to cooling. If we're heading towards global cooling, it could harm them financially. It could potentially kill some of them if in severe temperatures their system overworks and fails, and they're subject to severe temperatures. So it's just critically important to know if we have accurate information or not. What has changed with the NOAA data between 2013 and 2015 that makes for this swing in temperature consideration? Again, here's the chart that I showed you in an earlier section. And what we see is I'm going to be updating it for 2015 data by NOAA. The first thing they did, though, is they changed this period of time. They're going to give us average degree days. Instead of over 100 years, they're going to expand it to 120 years. I expanded my unfiltered data, and when I did that, I found by expanding from 100 years to 120, my heating degree days in southern Maine dropped 9 heating degree days, which is relatively insignificant. When I looked at what NOAA now had for their 119, 120 year average, it jumped 422 heating degree days per year. Over almost 120 years, that's what comes up with that 55,000 heating degree days that seems to have popped up out of nowhere. So I'm overlaying the 2015 data from NOAA in blue with the 2013 data in green in front of it, and you can see the substantial difference. Now, what the people who have revised this information have to hope is that no one has archived their data, no one has hard data going back 120 years, unfiltered hard data going back 120 years. So if all this disappears, and anyone, including that professor from Maine, if he happens to have just pulled up the 2015 gospel information from NOAA, he would rightfully see that we have heating degree days decreasing, which would indicate global warming, and therefore no black swan event occurs. So here we are, where we have the local heating degree days locally for Lewiston, Auburn in green, and in it I show the rise in temperatures just as the NOAA did for a period of time. But my data is also showing unfiltered data that we've been seeing a decrease for the last uh, 14 to 16 years, and based on what's happening with cycles of Atlantic decadum oscillatums and so forth, we may be continuing with lower temperatures. Now, if we look at the NOAA data from 2013 that I have put here, the early years seem to be in the ballpark. They spread a little bit. I'm surprised these years hadn't spread more, because green is southern Maine and the black is all of Maine. What I see in this region seems to make more sense to me for the NOAA all Maine data. I would expect all of Maine to be anywhere from a half a degree to maybe a full degree or more higher than the Lewiston Auburn region in southern Maine. But then we see this upward rise in temperatures here, which to me is suspicious based on what I've seen elsewhere. It's like they've blending and doing a little adjustment. But again, that's only speculation on my part, because I don't have archived data from prior times for NOAA. And now, again, where we have this data, I'm going to now introduce the 2015 data as temperatures as opposed to heating degree days, and we see with NOAA all Maine 2015 data, we have this substantial rewrite of temperatures that has strategically appears been set so that we have a very visible, very logical upward slope, which would indicate global warming. Now, key thing, take away my projections, and here's their line. Take away this, take away the local temperatures as an aberration, and you have global warming. So again, in summary of this, we see where in 2013 it had 55,000 less heating degree days. Um, it was 151 degrees warmer than what's being stated in the 2015 data by NOAA. Fortunately, I have archived the before and after temperatures between NOAA to show how the temperatures have been corrupted, manipulated, just over this 18-month span. So that now, if I had not had any of that prior information, and I just fed into NOAA the same parameters I did before, I get this graph, and you can download the Excel data that shows absolutely we're in a situation of global warming, and it has to be skeptics, deniers, to not agree with what you see here. And as I said, therefore, this chart confirms what they want to confirm, that there's global warming in Maine. In my opinion, NOAA, as I said before, has manipulated the heating degree day data to support the theory of global warming, which is why they can now state it's the sixth warmest year in contiguous United States. All I can tell you is, based on all this information, I upgraded. I went with the 6-ton system over the 4-ton because I do not find credibility in what a few individuals have done at the NOAA. I'm glad to see that Congress is investigating NASA over the climate data manipulations that apparently others have also seen. I know what's seen in Maine is very likely occurring elsewhere based on some before and afters I've seen with general information across the United States. Here we show um, the 30s being the most intensive time of temperatures, which is also what I've seen in my data. And U.S. has rewritten history of what's been transpiring. EPA also confirms the 30s being a strong period of time, in contradiction of what's being shown by NOAA. So, for those reasons, as I've mentioned to you earlier, I did not size the heating system at the Lake Lodge for worst case of -1 degree. That NOAA would be asserting would likely still be the case because we're in global warming. My data indicates that we're heading towards heavier seas, and we're going to be experiencing uh, 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 re-experiencing freezing of harbors and whatnot, just as we've seen in the last 3 or 4 months. So I size for worst cases of -20 to -30 degrees. Which brings us to an end of this. You have the closing observations in part 1. And with this, now I can return to my research for the book I'm working on concerning the nuclear industry called Kid Atlas. Thank you for spending the time to listen to my presentation. Have a great week.